Now, this story, the country's rail system is barely rolling. It's been beset by years of vandalism, theft and lack of maintenance. Now, the Transport Minister, Lindokuhle Xulu, hopes a white paper will get the sector steam back. He's been meeting stakeholders to get them on board. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan is also there to push the rail strategy. My colleague, that's eNCA reporter Lindokuhle Xulu, following those proceedings and joining us now live from the venue of this event. Good afternoon, Lindokuhle. Tell us, what's been the main things to come out of today's events?
Well, Praten, today the Transport Minister Lindokuhle Xulu has been engaging with the private sector as well as stakeholders within the Department of Transport just to get the ball rolling as far as that white paper policy document is concerned. We do understand that this is advocating not just for government to be heading this particular important infrastructure, but it is also advocating for the private sector to also be included. They must participate in ensuring that they ferry the communities as far as South Africa is concerned when it comes to rail. I am joined by the Minister right now, and we'll get right into it. He's been waiting patiently here. Thank you so much, Minister, for your time. Perhaps just give us your understanding of what the outcomes of these engagements were. We did hear some concerns that had been raised, but just capture for us what today was about and some of the things that you were able to achieve today.
We launched the biggest turbocharge in the rail sector. What is called white paper on rail policy, endorsed by cabinet. Today we're engaging with all sectors, but primarily with the private sector. You could see and you could hear for yourselves the biggest applause and most welcome intervention. The Achilles heel is going to be implementation. We've got a plan of action in terms of medium to long term. Long term, we're going to have to deal with the question of rail bill, intervention, master plan, but of immediate, it's a question of working with the private sector to open up the old branch lines. But at the same time, rail sector is largely dominated by government, public sector. We're now opening up for the private sector to come to the party to unlock some of the bottlenecks in relation to goods transportation from production sites to the harbour and all of that, to be in a position to mitigate the situation where in which most of the goods do not reach their destination on time. So the rail policy enables us to do that. It is most welcome. We are establishing a steering committee immediately to deal with the implementation with the private sector. We're going to be working in particular with public enterprise and its entities because we design policy, but at the end of the day, implementation, it is by Transnet and public enterprise. But as you would have seen here today, the minister was here, the entities were here, collegiality, working together is the spirit. That's how we're going to build this country and South Africa and bringing rail back on track.
Yeah, there's also concerns that had been raised in terms of guidelines, procurement issues, as well as just details. They were basically saying that the devil is in the detail. While trying to implement this, there would need to be some clarity in terms of how the private sector is involved. What is happening around some of that?
Well, the private sector in terms of involvement when it comes to procurement, we will be guided by the policy. Talks about concessioning, but the policy also talk about PSP, private sector participation in terms of the major projects. So those are the things that will actually be guiding us in terms of collaboration. And as a result, the question of, when it comes to concessionaire, the question of procurement and all of that is easily addressed based on the overall experience of the country's planning around private sector participation in some of the major project of infrastructure we are undertaking.
There's also then the issue of saying that rail is the backbone of transport, but integration and a multi-pronged approach is one of the things that everyone we've spoken to is speaking about, to say that yes, while there is this effort to fix the railway system, there are also other concerns when you look at the buses as well as the minibus taxi industry. All of those would then need to also be sorted out. And today, in fact, we were focusing as eNCA in terms of the buses, some of the BRTs, some of those projects that worked and some of those that didn't work. But in terms of these other modes of transport, creating a network here would require then a focus into other means of transport. But particularly, we were focusing on the bus system. Just give us a status of that, and what are the plans then to integrate it with this railway system that is being rehabilitated in this way?
The Integrated Public Transport Network, referred to as IPTN, Rea Vayas, Harambe, Leetola Polokwane, Harrying, Free State, Hugo George, my city, Cape Town, in Rustenburg. They're coming on board, except Mbombela, and as well as KwaZulu-Natal, eThekwini. You know, our integrated public transport network means that the taxis and the buses becomes the feeder into the network of the rail transport. They don't, oppose each other or working against each other. And that is why rail network is an important integral part of transport network in the country. It's not the backbone, it's an integral part. Without it, it will have dire consequences in relation to freight and logistics, dire consequences in terms of passenger transportation from a point of low-income households, those who cannot afford, then it means they are highly affected, they are waiting for transport if rail is not activated. So it's an integral part, and that is why it is going to assist us, this policy, to ensure that for the first time, even in passenger rail, not privatization, we will look at the possibility for the first time of bringing private sector participation in that regard. We talk about also the devolution strategy in the long term that must be developed in relation to local municipalities and their participation. But devolution will not happen without the authorization of the minister. But the minister will be guided by the strategy in relation to what a municipality can do within its power. So municipalities cannot go to Treasury and ask for that. They must ask from the Minister of Transport, like Cape Town has actually done, asking Minister of Finance about devolution and all of that. That is solely the prerogative of the Minister of Transport to grant or not to grant a feasibility study, and also authorization that you can operate the rail network at the municipal level. But those issues are no longer semantics. They are now in the policy in terms of what needs to be done. So we roll up our sleeves, we open up and bringing in the private sector. We're not bringing the private sector to kill jobs. We're bringing it in to create more jobs and the sustainability of the rail network in the country. But on its own, as the public sector, we should be in a position to move ahead in terms of the work that we're doing to get back our network in most of the areas that have been affected as a result of COVID vandalism.
All right, Minister, we'll leave it there for time, but certainly there's a lot to engage with the Minister when it comes to some of the efforts that are being put in to ensure that there is rehabilitation and that there is a sustainable, functioning railway system in the country. So those are some of the things that are coming out in terms of the engagement that he's had with the industry stakeholders, but more importantly, the private sector that is expected to have a buy-in when it comes to operating on some of these routes that are currently owned by national government.
Thank you very much, Lindokuhle Xulu there. The latest update then talking to the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula.